Greetings and welcome to Imaging Informatics Unplugged. This is Jason, and in here we're going to have some practical conversations about imaging informatics. Today we have a conversation with a friend of mine, Mohannad Hussain. Mohannad is an independent consultant in medical imaging. He's a developer by trade. He wears lots of different hats. You may have seen him leading the SIM Hackathon, or you may have seen him managing the RSNA Radiology Reimagined demonstration. Today in this conversation, we're going to talk about Mohannad's journey from the comfort of a big corporate job to the journey of a rogue independent consultant. And I found this conversation to be very enjoyable. I learned a lot as an independent consultant myself, speaking to Mohannad, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, welcome to the show. And today I have a friend of mine, Mohannad Hussain. And so welcome, Mohannad.
Thank you, Jay. It was a pleasure to be here talking with you.
I really appreciate you taking the time today. And so a couple of quick questions. We met in 2014. And so back then, I think it was at SIM, and you were just kicking off the hackathon. And since then, you've been involved in a lot of things, and we've intersected since then at SIMcast and a few things. I'm interested to hear, back then, you were working for one of the big PACS vendors, and I think you've worked for a couple of big PACS vendors. And I'm curious, now you're on your own, you're a consultant. And that term consultant is often very broad, and I'm a consultant, you're a consultant, we do very different things. So I want to explore what brought you down this path of first leaving the big corporation and going on your own, and what inspired you to make this move?
Yeah, that's a great question. That story is an interesting and slightly convoluted one. I'm going to try and tell it in a comprehensible way, hopefully cohesive too. I have actually ran a side freelance business for a number of years. I think it was starting in the year 2008 or something. And at the time, I'm a developer by training, as you may recall. And that freelance business was actually just doing development, freelance work, apps, mobile apps, web apps, that kind of stuff. And I was actually always very transparent with my employers about it. My managers always knew about it. I was very clear about conflict of interest, so I didn't do anything that was even close to the domain in which I worked on. And also nothing within office hours, and had different set of laptops, etc. The whole spiel. And I think that taste for a little bit of freelance, free life, and being in control gave me the idea in the back of my mind that one day I'd love to be self-employed. Now, if you went back to me 10 years ago, let's say around the time I met you, and told me, hey, in 10 years you're going to be self-employed, I would have told you that you'd be crazy. For a number of reasons. Number one, I didn't think it would happen so soon in my life, and also partially because with my young family, not so young anymore, but still relatively young, yeah. I thought, okay, the family needs me. I don't know if I'll have the time, because I know being self-employed is very demanding, time-wise. Mm-hmm. That being said, fast forward to 2020. We're all trying to forget what happened in 2020, but in this case, this was a big factor. So between the pandemic and lockdowns and employment situation at the time, I was employed, but I don't think I was extremely happy with what I was doing at the time. I had a little voice in me, and some friends also give me the thought of, hey, why don't you just try and do your own thing? And at the time I was like, okay, you know what? I'm at a point in my life where I could probably afford to take a bit of a risk. So I'm going to go ahead and make that jump. And it's funny because I tell people there's a slight side story here. My dad is an extremely worry-free type of person. But I still remember very clearly, around the time that I decided to leave work and go out on my own, I had a very rare moment when my dad actually had a worried look on his face. He actually took me aside that day. He was like, are you sure about what you're doing? And I remember clearly telling him, Dad, it's okay, I promise you, it's fine. And I told him I have a plan A, B, C, D, and E. And that's exactly what I did. Now, I am spoiled and I count my blessings every day. The fact that I actually had plan A, B, C, D, E was, of course, really good to know and good to have. But yeah, I'm glad to be here today to tell you that plan A worked. It It was, I think, a mixture of luck and, I guess, preparation without even realizing that I was preparing for that moment. So, one of the happy accidents that happened to me around the time I decided to go out and do consulting was the fact that I had built a really great network of people. And all these years, just like you know, becoming friends with these people wasn't about, hey, one day I'm going to be consulting and I want them to be my
Yeah, yeah.
potential customers. It was more like, these are lovely people I enjoy talking to. And next thing you know, your friends are your customers and they bring you clients and stuff like that. So that was probably one of my happiest accidents.
Yeah, it's
I
it's
did
funny when
warn
it
you.
comes organically. I think that's the key thing is if you're interested in people and you're just and then you're in this community of people. But yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Go on.
No, I was going to say, I told you there was a story with multiple tentacles, so hopefully that gave you like a little bit of an idea of what it actually looked like.
No, absolutely. So it's always and it's a harrowing path to make that leap, and you have this. I don't know if it is true security, but it's a sense of security that there's a big parent company that's going to take care of you, and when you're going out on your own, you're only on your own, and it can. And there's so many aspects and hats that you're going to have to wear that are outside of the domain that you're working within. So all of a sudden you're a copywriter or you're a bookkeeper or whatever. So I'm curious how you were there unexpected challenges along the way around the foundational setup of making sure everything was working properly as a business. How did that work, or were there challenges that you came across?
Yeah, it could have been a lot more challenging if it wasn't for great friends. As an example, our mutual friend Don Dennison was instrumental. He was so patient in answering a lot of my dumb questions at the time about all like basic business things, including basic questions like, how much do I charge for my time? He walked me through the process of here's how you figure out like a decent amount, and this is how you do it. He also opened up my eyes to things like buying corporate insurance. But to your question of surprises that I didn't anticipate, that was actually one of them that was hilarious because in the consumer world, you're used to being able to just apply for insurance online. You could basically buy everything online and not have to worry about talking to people and answer a lot of questions. That definitely wasn't the case for corporate insurance. I remember applying for corporate insurance. And again, remember 2020, like serious health pandemic going on. The moment you said you worked in healthcare, most insurance companies didn't even want to talk to you, period. Just as soon as the word healthcare came up. And then the ones that did talk to me would send me like 11-page forms.
Uh-huh.
Had to be filled out, took forever, and like a lot of back and forth. It's funny, like it wasn't just like, just take my money, give me an insurance policy. It was a lot more complicated.
I remember you speak about the strong community, and you mentioned Don, and you guys working together, and through that, years later, I went out on my own, and Don was very helpful for me. I remember we met in the Boston Pizza in Milton, and he was very gracious with his time. David Kwan was another person. As I was working with these individuals, I got to lean on all the experience that you guys. There was a huge email trail about business insurance. I got to pick it up, but it really speaks to the. I think everyone really wants to help each other.
Yeah.
Fun is everyone's really working to try to put everyone forward, and it's really nice.
I was genuinely happy to see you go out into consulting as well. And I don't know if you remember, but I actually made a joke with you at the time that my goal in life was for you to remain unemployed so you could be self-employed.
We'll keep that going. We'll see how that's going. So I'm curious, from your side, you're involved. I remember we went out for lunch and you were explaining some of the projects you were involved in, and so you've got many projects you touch on. I'm curious, when you have many projects, what is the capacity that you or the skill set that you're employing? You mentioned you're a coder by trade. Is that typically what you're working with when you're doing with your clients, or explain to us a bit about that?
It's a good question. You're assuming there is a method to the madness, which is an incorrect assumption, but I do try. So one thing I should point out, I usually joke with people that when I left employment to become a consultant, self-employed, I set a number of goals for myself. And there are a lot of goals that I succeeded at, but there is one big goal that I 100% failed at. One of my top goals was to work less. I was actually thinking I may be working 4 days a week or something less. That did not work out. I am working more than I've ever worked in my life. That being said, when you're self employed, and I think you know this, Jason, because we've had this particular conversation before, when you're working for yourself and you actually get to see all the fruits of your labor without any filter process, etc., it just feels so satisfying, honestly, more than anything else. Now, back to your question. I've always enjoyed dabbling around, and although I've generally had great managers, it's never easy to be someone who doesn't conform to a mold. Trying to negotiate that thing with your manager is never really fun. So for me, that was also one of my goals going out on my own. Is just I want to do whatever I want to feel like doing. So I still do a little bit of development. I joke with my developer friends that I found developer nirvana. The majority of the code I write mostly is prototype code, so it's just like hack, and then you give it else to someone else who makes it production worthy. It's the ultimate in programming. So basically, you get to have fun without any of the drawbacks and no accountability for the stuff I create.
Yeah, yeah.
It's brilliant. I'd estimate that I'm probably doing maybe like 30% of my time now still goes to development, and mostly because I love it and I want to. I could choose to do other things. But I would say that overall, my entire time, 100%, is somewhat technical in nature. So if it's not coding, it still is talking about things like integrations, a topic that's near and dear to my heart and yours, things like architecture, that kind of stuff.
It's very nice. And I generally try to keep these around 3 to 4 questions, and I think we're coming up maybe on the last one here. I'm actually just curious. You mentioned in the beginning you started out dabbling in helping out in non-healthcare related. Have you kept a foot in that non-healthcare related area?
Initially, I did. For the first year, I actually did. But as I mentioned, I'm working more than I anticipated I would. And at one point, it became too distracting. So at some point, I actually had to stop doing any work outside of healthcare. That being said, I'm extremely grateful when I look back at my life for all these years of things that I did. On the face of it, the most obvious thing is, hey, extra income was always nice. Having a family and all that stuff, being able to afford a vacation trip or a new car or something like that. But the truth is, and this is actually one of the reasons why managers, the different managers I had over the years who were okay with it, is I actually sold it to them as, this is a way for me to do my career development that costs you absolutely nothing. You don't have to pay me for me to get trained or anything like that. And that was actually very true, because doing things outside of healthcare in my own time allowed me to experiment with new things. It allowed me to dabble in, again, developing mobile applications, mapping applications, that kind of stuff. It was a lot of fun, but no, I've not kept it up.
Okay. I appreciate you taking this time. We could go on, but we'll leave that for a Simcast. And I appreciate the time today, Mohannad. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks. It's been a good 10 years being your friend. Thanks.
To another 10 years and many beyond.
There we go.